The Dave Chappelle Show became wildly popular and is basically a cult classic. It came out in the beginning of 2003. It had an extreme and unusual way of making fun of really taboo topics, including up to and including race. So why was this show so popular? If you haven't seen it, first of all, I strongly recommend that you go see it. Like literally, you need to go on YouTube after this video, of course, and look up some of the skits that were on the show. But here's the question. What was it in Dave Chappelle's chart that led him to that type of popularity with this show? So I took a look at his chart and we'll figure it out right now. So I came up with like a handful of things that I thought were probably the most important and would contribute the most to him being who he was and gaining that level of success with the Dave Chappelle Show. One of the first things I noticed is that he had Neptune, the planet Neptune, in his third house. So Neptune, as some of you may or may not know, Neptune was in that house, but every planet has a house that it rules, and that's not always the house that it's in. Think of it as like being a visitor. It's from one place, but it visits another place. So it's one from one house, sometimes two houses, and it visits another house. So it's visiting the third house, but it's from the sixth and the seventh house because the sixth and the seventh house had Pisces over it, and Neptune is ruled by the sign Pisces. So he had Neptune in the third house. Third house is associated with communication. It's associated with short-term travel as well, but like thinking, communication, all sorts of communication, whether it's emails, phone calls, text messages, all sorts of writing. And so this was really good for him as far as writing. It was also good for comedy. Third house is really good for comedy as well. So this made him good for him. But also because the planet in question is Neptune, Neptune is pretty good for TV, like movies and TV. That form of work works out really well. So that's the first thing I noticed that I felt made Dave Chappelle really good for writing for TV. Second, I looked at his 11th house. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I'm very keen on the 11th house. I feel like the 11th house has a lot to say about what we're supposed to be doing, where we are. A lot of times people look at the 10th house, but I look at the 11th house because the sign that's over the 11th house will eventually progress over the 10th house. So you should still look at that. So I look at his 11th house. And I noticed that Dave was destined to profit from self-expression due to the rising sign ruler being in the 11th house. So with his rising sign being there, rising sign like ruler, Mercury being there, his natural expression, the rising sign usually, it can say something about what you look like, but it also has a lot to say about how you express yourself. So when the ruler are the place that the planet is from, going back to my original analogy, when the place that the planet is from is in another house, like 11th house, and that's considered a house of profit for your career, it can say that the person is going to profit from something having to do with themselves personally. Some people have a job where they sit behind a desk or no one sees them, but then some people have really public jobs where people see them often or every day or something, or every week or something like that. And this was a situation that he was in. By being a comedian and doing these skits, he was front and center. And so to me, him having Mercury, which also is highly associated with thinking and writing, especially writing. Usually when a person's Mercury is very prominent, such as it's the ruler of the first house or the ruler of some person's sun sign or something like that. Usually people like that, which are people that can have connection to Gemini and Virgo, which if you know Dave is a Virgo. And with him having that, it makes him really good at writing and communication. And he has an unusual or distinct way of communicating that is all his. Specifically, I don't know anyone that sounds or talks like Dave Chappelle. You definitely know him when you hear him. So, encompassing with that him being very unique in that way, he has his Mercury, the ruler of his rising sign, sextiling, which is a positive aspect of relationship. he has his Mercury sextiling Uranus. So to tell you a little bit about Uranus, if you haven't watched any of my videos or any videos talking about Uranus, Uranus is one of those planets that rules being unique, being different, being a genius sometimes, being original in some way. So him having a positive aspect between a planet being related to being different and a planet having to do with his communication skills is further proof that he would be really good at communicating in a way that was original to him and distinct to him and would be a benefit to him. Especially given that Uranus is the ruler of his fifth house, and the fifth house rules the entertainment industry. And so you can kind of see how these things are working together for him to be who he became. All of these things helped him. He also has Mercury in sextile to his MC or midheaven, and the midheaven is connected with your career, your vocation. So again, here we see this tie in again, as far as him having communication, factoring very heavy in his career and how he ends up doing what he's doing. Moving on, I also look at it as a second house, which rules earned income. So to be clear, most houses, all of the houses rule more than one thing. Okay. But sometimes a house is more known for one thing or the other, but there'll be a number of things covered over that house, because every house covers something in your life. All aspects of our life are covered in some part in one of the 12 houses. And so for the second house, is often connected to earned income. His second house ruler, Venus, is in his first house. And so I talked earlier about how Mercury is a ruler of his first house and it's in the 11th house, having to do with profit from his career. Now he has the ruler of a second house, the house that rules earned income, in that first house. Suggesting that he will personally be front and center in anything that he does to make money. So sometimes this can pop up for a person who might end up being like a model or an athlete or something like that, because it can suggest that a person is going to use their body to make money. So it can be a model. It could also be an actor who also uses their body to make money. I mean, think about it. Actors, they gain weight for a part, they lose weight, they grow a beard, they cut their hair, they dye their hair, they do all sorts of things to encompass the traits of a character, and to bring that up on screen so that everybody can see it and everybody connects with the character, understands what the character is about, and they get paid for it. So this is kind of the same thing for Dave. Actually, I think it is the same thing, because if you watch the show, then you know in his different skits, a lot of times he had costumes on. He was, may have spoken a little differently, and there were different concepts behind the different scenes that he had. So this was definitely something that was attributed to him specifically. And also I noted that he had has Pluto ruling the third house as well, which suggests in him that he would be suggests in a medium or to entertain, make people laugh, but also, Pluto can be kind of a heavy planet. Some people are a little scared of anything having to do with Pluto or the 8th house. But his Pluto may have really just assisted him in exploring those taboo topics that I was talking about, such as race or other types of skits that he had. I want to try to be PG-13. But, if you saw his show, like I said, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend looking at clips after this video. He explored a lot of different topics that were, you almost can't imagine that he would address it, but he addressed it and it was funny. Also, I noticed that, you might be wondering, at some point you might have wondered, what if we're talking about why Dave is funny and why Dave was so successful in being a comedian and being as original as he is, you might be wondering, well, Jay, if this is the case, what was the explanation for him abruptly leaving a very successful show? So again, if you've seen any of his interviews about it or anything, you kind of have heard his explanation of it. But remember how I mentioned that you probably won't find him. Well, I didn't mention this earlier, but I thought about this earlier with him. He's the type of person that you probably never find him double talking very much, because his opinions are based on his solid principles. He has a strong principles, a sense of right and wrong. He has his boundaries, and maybe a unique wisdom that's all his own. Again, if you've seen his stand up, you kind of get this impression about him. Well, this was him leaving the show may have had something to do with him having Sun sextile Saturn in his chart. So Sun and Saturn were at odds due to a progression in his chart toward the end of the show. And if you know anything about the Sun, of course, Sun and Saturn, Sun usually rules your personality, how you express yourself in the world, just your overall general personality, right? So Saturn is a little different. It's a bit of a taskmaster. It rules like authority figures and strict boundaries and having to go back and redo things over again and working really hard and being maybe even being tired and not being, maybe even being insecure. It rules all of those things, fears, all of that stuff, all of the ugly stuff that you may not like, but you kind of work your way through it. To give you, I guess, a overall idea, think about the fact that Saturn rules the sign Capricorn. Capricorns tend to be very ambitious. Like, I've never really met a lot of Capricorns that were not ambitious. Many of them end up in managerial roles, leadership roles. They naturally gravitate towards them no matter how challenging or difficult they are, because that's just them. They just naturally look for those types of roles. So this could be a connection to him being in a leadership role, but also be a connection to him in his relationship with people in leadership roles, which is kind of the impression I get based on what I heard about him in terms of the direction the show was going in and how uncomfortable he was with it, because like I said, he has strong, solid principles and ideas about the way things should go, and he's probably more likely to stick to them as that situation showed at that time. And he also had a transiting Saturn over his 10th house, and that can make a person very weary. Like if you've ever had Saturn over your 10th house, I know I have, it can make you really, really tired. It can make you just so weary. The word tired is underestimated and sometimes frustrated because of the way things are going at the time. And sometimes it can be tied to bosses. So his bosses may have been the executives for the network, him having challenges with them. But overall, it sounds like he was just, I would say, just based on what I saw, I would say he was probably really, really tired, and he'd taken on a lot of responsibility, being that he had just signed a new contract for even more money, and it may have been a bit overwhelming, and he felt like, listen, I need to get out of this. Between this and the creative direction we're going in, this isn't who I am, this isn't who I want to be and what I want to do and what I want to be known for. So let me just get out of this now. That's probably likely what happened, based on the fact that he had Saturn transiting his 10th house, and he had his sun in odds and progressions as well. So a very interesting thing I do want to mention, because I've noticed this every time I notice something more and more, I want to mention it. And you may hear me mention certain things across several episodes, and that's because I'm honestly seeing it more than once. So what I saw in Dave's chart is that he does have a yod in his chart pointing towards his 8th house. And just to give you guys an idea what the yod is, maybe I'll do a separate video on a yod. You guys can just let me know if you would like to know more. But yods are considered major configurations that are created when 3 planets form a triangle to each other, basically. It's a long kind of cone looking triangle where you have the top part, the apex with 1 planet, and then the 2 planets at the bottom, at the base, that are forming a sextile or a positive aspect to each other. But then you have them forming this minor aspect to that apex planet. So that apex planet is pointing towards his 8th house. And that eighth house planet was triggered that year that he decided to quit the show. So it suggested he had to do something really drastic, and there was a bit of a crisis for him personally. That was the reason why he needed to get out. So that's what I saw in his chart in relation to that. So that's pretty much everything I want to talk about with him. I don't want to go into too much detail with him. I see a lot of charts. I see a lot of things in different charts, but I just want to make it succinct just to talk about why Dave Chappelle has been so successful as a writer, as a comedian in TV, and why he's so distinct. So let me know what you think about Dave Chappelle. What's your favorite joke, your favorite skit from the show, or your favorite stand-up that he's done? He's done several, including some on Netflix. So that's it for now. Take care, and I will see you next time.